Hey everyone, happy Tuesday. I am just inviting my friend on here. There she is.
Hello, how are
Hi.
you?
This is like the quickest that I've ever done this.
Oh my gosh,
Like,
so exciting because I had no
jump
idea.
on and I'm like awkwardly pressing buttons and talking to myself and not knowing what to say. So I have company early on. Welcome.
I'm going to move up a little bit. Thank you. How are you doing?
I'm good. Happy Tuesday. It feels like Monday over and over and over again.
I know. This is really getting monotonous. But this is a nice break to the regular part of the day.
It sure is. So welcome everyone who is joining in. Say hello to Brazil. That's cool.
Oh, nice.
Drop a wave. Say hello. We are going to talk all about mediation today. So I'm going to introduce you to my friend, my guest, my colleague, which is so cool because let me introduce you to Rosemarie Ferrante. She's a Connecticut lawyer, and I've been practicing almost 20 years, and you've been practicing a while, and yet, like, our paths just crossed recently, which is crazy to me.
So crazy. It's so crazy. But, it goes to show that before COVID, we were also limited geographically.
Right.
And now with Zoom and with all of the geographic barriers down, we're all able to connect. So it's been so awesome. That's been one of the positives, right?
Absolutely. And I feel like that is maybe the only positive, but it's like my world has kind of exploded open in terms of the connections. And you and I connected not even like directly at first. It was like all of these other people around who we both know. And they're like, have you guys talked yet?
I know. It is so funny.
So you practiced in a different part of the state that I practice in, which is why our paths really haven't crossed. And you practice exclusively mediation for family cases, right?
100%, yeah. So in my prior life, I was a litigator in Lower Fairfield County in Connecticut, and about 7 years ago, I opened my own practice, and I solely do non-adversarial divorce, so mediation and collaborative divorce as well, which I think you do too, right?
I do, but I also litigate still too. Like I haven't been able to get away from that. So how did you make that shift? Because for anyone who's listening out there, mediation is when you're in a divorce and it's a messy divorce and you're in the family law world. Like I think most lawyers who really practice from like a really good place wanting to help people say that mediation is the best way to go, but yet so often we get stuck really litigating, and because it's just the nature of what we do. But you have been able to step away from the high conflict cases that require trials and litigation completely. So how did you make that transition?
I couldn't do it anymore. And I listen, there's definitely situations where the court is necessary. You see that every day. In a perfect world, everybody could mediate their divorce or have an amicable resolution of their divorce. Um, I couldn't do it. And so I had to sort of save my sanity, and I just walked away from it completely. I don't do any independent representation of parties except for review counsel work if they're in a mediation. And collaborative work is, we're representing individuals, but again, it's with a signed agreement that nobody's going to court. So the only time I go into a courtroom, and this was even in pre-COVID days, was for uncontested hearings. And, I'm just trying to spread awareness that this is a very viable way, especially now with so little being able to happen in the courts. Again, it's not, there are certainly situations where litigation is absolutely necessary, but I see those situations shrinking. And I've had the benefit of working with people who understand that what started with love can end with respect, and they're able to put all of the anger and emotions aside and do what's best for their families and make decisions together as opposed to having a judge or attorneys make decisions for them.
I think one of the most important things that you said in all of that awesome wisdom is that you stepped away from litigation because it was too hard for you. So if you think about like as the lawyer and how much of a toll it takes on us doing that work, like imagine what it does to the people whose lives it involves and the families. It's devastating.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I went through my own divorce, and we did it without the courts. And I always say to people when I'm talking more personally, I certainly don't talk to clients like this, but I saw that big pool of dark hate that I would have loved at times to jump in. I mean, I stayed up at night and fantasized about the depositions, and what I would want to say or do or ask. And I just kept coming back to my kids, and these three beautiful children, my favorite people in the entire world, who I would not have if it wasn't for my former spouse. How could I hate him? How could I possibly hate the person who gave me those gifts? So I understand emotionally how that's so tempting, but at the end of the day, it really doesn't benefit your family. And so there are ways that you can smoothly transition your family through the divorce process. You're still a family. Family doesn't stop just because you get divorced. You're still going to see each other, at games and at family events. So to the extent that you can preserve that relationship, not only for your own mental health, but mostly for your children's, why wouldn't you try to do that, right?
Well, what if one person has been so wronged and there is an affair and they're so hurt, and can that person come to the table and really able to mediate, and do they have that right frame of mind to mediate and have it be successful, do you think?
Well, I've seen it, yes, but to do that, you need, it takes a village, right, to guide a family through the divorce process. So lawyers are sometimes the smallest part of the equation. You need the lawyers for your agreement. You need the lawyers to make sure the language is tight, to make sure that everything that you put in the agreement can be effectuated. You need the lawyers to play devil's advocate and make sure, well, what if? Because we all know that down the road, there may be issues. So if you've got to fall back in your agreement, the language has to be tight. But there are other players. And so early on in my consultations, I talk to people, number one, as spouses, you have to decide which process you want to use together to get your family through it. And then individually, what support do you need? And so, especially in Connecticut, I mean, certainly all over the country, but we have groups of the Connecticut Council for Non-Adversarial Divorce and professionals who are dedicated to helping families transition through the process. And there are divorce coaches. There are obviously mental health professionals who can help you. There are financial professionals who greatly assist in mediation and collaborative divorces. The whole goal is you need to make good, educated decisions, having all of the information. And part of that is obviously the judicial norms, what happens in Connecticut. But then, to be able to make these decisions, you need a support team. Because these are difficult decisions, right? With long-standing consequences. How can you make those decisions without all the information? So at these really vulnerable parts of our lives, we have to make these challenging decisions. So you need that information. You need the legal support, the financial support, and the emotional support.
Right, absolutely. I always say that you don't need everybody, but you do need somebody. And so every case is different as to what levels of support that you need. And sometimes you need that financial advisor really hands in, and sometimes you don't. And it's really just understanding what it is you need for the best support. That's such good advice.
And it's resources I'm sure you provide your clients as well. They don't know what they don't know.
Right.
And we've been doing this so long that we know who's out there. We know the support that they have available to them. And you're right. Every mediation is different. It's a different cast of, different professionals who are involved in it. And so it's so key to finding that right group of professionals for your family. What works for your family is the most important part.
Right. Okay. So I'm going to put you on the spot for a second. So many parents will say, and they come as my clients come, or whether it's mediation, that they're both really fighting for as much time with their kids as possible. And you have this tug of rope for this shared parenting schedule. What do you say to those parents who are really just fighting over a parenting schedule? And they're all coming from a good place because they want to be with their kids as much as possible, but they're really, someone's holding on to their my kids, or it's my time, and that kind of that mindset that the other parent should just get, the little bit of time, and maybe that parent didn't do a ton during the marriage because that was the dynamic of the marriage, and one parent was more responsible. How do you have that conversation, or what do you do with that dynamic like that?
Oh my gosh, there's so many things things that my mind is racing.
I know,
So
sorry.
first of all, like the parenting plan is less for parents and more for the kids, right? So what is best for the kids? And I don't know anybody who would say that kids don't benefit from the involvement of both parents. And I will also say that divorce is such an opportunity for the parents who maybe weren't sorry about that, who maybe weren't the overly involved parent, or maybe the parent who wasn't doing the doctor visits and the school conferences, to now be involved in that. And that benefits the kids. So in the first instance, we should all recognize that it's a sort of a new ballgame now. Everyone has the opportunity to have a different parenting relationship with their kids now. And as parents, we should support that relationship because it helps the kids benefit. And I always say, because we all have this like fear early on in the divorce process of other people. And, what about his new significant other or her, whatever it is. There are not enough people in this crazy world who can love our children. So let's give them that gift of having that love from the other parent. That's the first part. And then the other part is parenting plans have evolved, right? I mean, remember when we started practicing what they looked like? Mm-hmm. And they've evolved so greatly. So I kind of tell people, put all your expectations down, release that. Because especially now with COVID, kids having school from home, parents working from home, everything's changed.
Right.
And so it doesn't need to be yesteryear's parenting plans.
Right.
You can create it as, and I've done, and I'm sure you have too, 9-week rotations based on a shift worker, and in that instance, It was a nurse, and she had a very strange, unique, I guess I should say, work schedule. And so we were able to, figure out a way, and it's a lot of work and a lot of time, as long as both parents are flexible and open to giving her the time she needed with the kids when she wasn't working, giving dad some time during the week when he was, but had to have a different plan, and so it's really about being flexible, and opening our thought process to all the possibilities. It's your family. No one knows your family better than you.
Right. And we see that, we do see that a lot with nurses and police officers and firefighters, that type of rotating schedule. Yeah. And I feel like when we get stuck is because someone really wants something very concrete and the same, and that's never been their family dynamic. And they talk to someone, and a friend maybe, who had to put together a parenting plan, and their schedule is the same week to week, and why can't they have that same thing? So I think it's so important too, is to not compare yourself, comparing yourself to anything, social media, whatever it is, just that comparing is not going to serve you well. You really have to look at your family dynamic and what's happening and what's best for your kids in order to make that best decision. It's not a one size fits all.
Absolutely.
Have you seen a change in mediation through COVID, the pandemic, and now that, like in Connecticut, the courts are they're open and everything's virtual for the most part, and things look very, very different than it used to be? Has, in your practice, that changed mediation for you?
Well, yes, because I'm doing everything via Zoom, and so that's really been different. And I had been doing Zoom prior to the pandemic, but most people back then didn't want to do it. Now there sort of was no choice. Yeah. And I have to say, there's been a lot of pros from it. I think that people like not having to travel, not having to go through traffic and get to your office. They can be in their own home. And it's funny. I mean, even now, like, we can see every facial expression, right? So you almost get a more intense, from the mediator's perspective, view on the participants. So that's changed it. I do love the fact that it's more accepted. And I do think in Connecticut, there was always this little divide between litigators and mediators. And I think that we're starting to kind of come together more and recognize that it is a really good, viable solution for many, many families, because you really don't need the court until the very end. And as you know, and I don't know if your viewers know, even now, you don't have to go to court in person for your uncontested hearing. So that's a beautiful thing, And so I love that it's more accepted. And I do think that there are a lot more mediators now, too. Have you noticed that? I wonder if you've noticed in your area that it
Yeah, I think
seems.
everyone who was quick to just kind of punt the problems to court and will deal with it in court now are more inclined to say, let's sit down, let's hop on a Zoom, let's try to figure this out.
Mhm.
Because the alternative is waiting a really long time to get the court's attention. And that's it, as good as mediation is through Zoom. And I think that it's amazing that we can now file papers and people don't even have to step foot in court. And I think Connecticut was a little behind the ball on that to begin with because the other states did do that. I think litigation becomes extremely difficult over Zoom.
Yeah.
And it loses a lot of its impact, and people want their day in court and they want to be
Mhm.
heard, and it feels less satisfying to them if that's what they're looking for when you're doing it over Zoom. So I do think that
Yeah.
you had a lot of attorneys who practice who were quick to say, let's go to court and litigate and just let a judge decide.
Right.
Almost kind of lazy, I'll say that, because it's easier sometimes just to
Mhm.
let someone else decide. And now they really have to sit down and kind of work through things if they want to help their clients get through this pretty quickly, because it's a really long process now that we don't have the access to the actual physical courts. So
And
noticing
it's a
that.
really different hat for attorneys because as
Yeah.
attorneys, we're taught to think like a lawyer and to
Mhm.
advocate for our clients. And this is a very different thinking, but and it is harder. And if it's harder for us professionals, right? Imagine the people
Right.
who are so in it
Yeah.
and so emotionally invested. We're asking them to do something really challenging and to sort of let's deal with the emotions with the support team you have, but let's look at what are your goals? What are you trying to achieve? You know what I find so often, and it never ceases to amaze me in mediation? I'm listening to the spouses, and they're so used to disagreeing that they think they're disagreeing, but they're
Yeah.
actually not. There's an underlying thread of something. And if we can sort of extract that thread and build on that, we can come up with solutions. And in the end, that's what we're trying to help people is find the solutions that work the best for your family, that are going to align your individual goals, right, as best we can, given the circumstances of your family.
Hmm.
So it's not an easy mediation isn't easy, and people really have to be able to be creative and flexible. But the goal is, no one's going to win. We're going to find the solution that makes the most sense for your family, and that you're going to be satisfied with. You
Right.
shouldn't, right?
Yeah, and so mediation, no one wins, but when you go to trial and you litigate, both people lose.
Right.
And I
Right.
think that that's such a distinction because you can mediate and maybe you're not entirely happy with it, but the point is that you were able to craft this agreement and make decisions and decide what was most important to you. And you go to court and the judge is going to do something, who knows what the judge is going to do. Did the
Mhm.
judge have a bad day? Did they have some of their own bias that they're bringing into this? Like,
Right.
really, they're just humans, and you don't know what's going to happen, and you're stuck with that.
And something you said has me thinking because I always think about when people say they want their day in court, and I think they have this fantasy of what that's going to be, right? And so many of us lawyers talk about, and we've seen this. You take a whole piece of paper,
Yep.
and that's your whole story, and you think the judge is going to be wowed by that story. You've been wronged, that whole story. If you fold it in half, right? That's
Yep.
what you told your lawyer because of time and whatever, fold it in another quarter, and that's what your lawyer remembers from it, and you fold it, and in the end the judge has this tiny 1 inch vision of that whole story, and so you're not really getting that day that you thought you were getting. He's not hearing it all. It's just by virtue of what a hearing looks like, especially now when they're virtual, right?
I love that example because I use it all the time
Do
for
you?
clients. I use it on
Mhm.
just for podcast interviews. I always use it because I think it illustrates so perfectly what you're saying is that your day in court is such a tiny small piece of your story, and
Yeah.
it's almost like guaranteed no matter what the end result is, no matter how good it is, you're still going to feel a little slighted because
Yeah.
you didn't get the full thing out, or maybe the judge disregarded something that you thought was so important and they were just like, it doesn't matter.
Yeah. And they've heard it all, I mean, sadly, they've heard it all. So are they shocked by affairs? No. Are they shocked by, even drug or alcohol use? No. So it's unfortunate. And everyone's story is important, but, internalize it and deal with it on an emotional level and look at the financial decisions you have to make financially. You have to sort of compartmentalize it.
So, what does a mediator do, and what do they not do?
Okay. Well, a mediator does not make the decisions for you. So I think that a lot of people have that misconception that you're going to each tell your side of the story and your mediator is going to decide. A mediator, whether they're an attorney or a mental health professional or even a financial professional, is an unbiased facilitator of communication, of conversation. So, although I'm an attorney, when I have my mediator hat on, I cannot give any independent legal advice. And people really need to understand that. I can give some information and we can talk about what the equitable distribution statute in Connecticut says or what the case law says. I always encourage people to have review counsel. So attorneys outside of the mediation room who can advise you and give you some real advice, because I cannot do that. So as a mediator, we're going to have conversation. We're going to explore options. We're going to try to pull out what your underlying goals are. And really the goal is to give you, the participant, resources and information so you can make the best decisions for your family. A lot of times I feel like it's almost like the ringleader, right? Like, you're kind of trying to get everybody through the process, give a lot of information, provide resources, come back to the room, have discussion, think about it. There shouldn't be pressure to ever make decisions at that time. And the goal is good, educated decisions. So really giving information and resources so people can make those decisions.
And I think what's so interesting about the sort of the art of mediation is that everyone does it a little bit different, and there's different styles. So I'm just curious: is your style to meet with clients separately and then bring them together, or do everything as a group? Like personally, for me, we do the group meeting. And I like it that way, but I was trained from someone who's highly respected, and he liked the individual caucuses. So
yeah, I don't do individual caucuses, and I've never really felt a need, although practitioners who do find that so strange.
Yeah.
I do every email, every phone conversation, every meeting is together. And I think that that's the best way to be unbiased. I do understand sometimes people and other practitioners feel like you can do a caucus and you're going to really kind of explain what that means. But I do everything together, from, again, every email. And occasionally I'll get like a side email, and I always have, or more often than not, it is an accident. But I will always put the other person on the email and respond that way. I want everyone to have, and even from my initial consultations, I do them with both spouses so they can get all the information on their options, including litigation, so they can decide which is best for their family.
Yeah, and I do the same thing because I feel like, and I don't think there's one way that's better than the other. I think it's just such a personal preference. But I like to have that sort of everyone's on equal playing fields, and no one feels like someone got more time or had more say in something.
Yeah.
So, okay, final question is, as a mediator, can you mediate anywhere or just in Connecticut?
Well, that is a good question because I am admitted in New York as well. I have not practiced in New York since I was a baby lawyer, and it's so different, right? I mean, we border New York in my part of Connecticut, and the law is so different. And I feel as a facilitative mediator, I like to give information, and so I don't really like to do states outside of my jurisdiction. A lot of mediators do, and if they do and they're not admitted in those other jurisdictions, then they'll have an attorney in that jurisdiction do all of the paperwork because, of course, you can't be drafting the agreements then.
Right. And so how do we find you? Where do we follow you?
So I don't even know. What is my Instagram handle? Divorce Mediation CT. I think it's divorce underscore mediation underscore CT.
I'll tag you in this chat anyway. So.
Okay, great, awesome. And I have a Facebook page. My website is divorcemediationct.com. You can find all of my contact information on the link to my Instagram account as well.
And then the final question is, do you have a tip for someone who's just starting out in the process and they're not quite sure what to do and which avenue or which process that they want to do? What would be the first thing you tell them to do?
Well, there's a lot of bad information out there, right, Renee? We know that. So, to get the best information, I would say to have an initial consultation with your spouse, with a mediator or an attorney, and understand your options. I do divorce workshops, and so if you follow me, we're having another workshop in a couple of weeks, and I do those really to give people their options. What does mediation, collaborative, and litigation mean? A certified divorce financial analyst joins me, and she talks about financial considerations and things to think about prior to starting the divorce action.
It's so important, and I think it comes down to educating yourself, and don't rely on everything you read or everything you hear. Just because your friend's cousin's aunt's sister did something one way and her divorce looked a certain way doesn't mean that the way it works. And don't rely on Google for everything. Right. Make sure you're going to a source of reliable information. Really,
do the D course.
Yes, thank you. Yeah. All right, awesome. Thank you so much for joining me. It was so nice to chat with you.
Oh, so nice to chat with you too. This was a lot of fun. Thank you. And we'll have to talk offline and catch up some more.
Absolutely. Sounds good. Bye-bye.
All right, have a good day. Bye-bye.
Grace, didn't work. It didn't work. I don't think. Damn it. It didn't work.